We are recording. Good morning. Hey, what's up, Amanda? What's up, Kelly?
Good morning. Thank you for having me this morning.
You're welcome. We have Kelly Manzone today. We're so excited. This could be a great podcast. Can't wait to hear what you have to say and what you've been doing.
Well, right now I feel like every day is kind of like the upside down world, and I just roll into the next day. But right now is actually kind of an exciting time because I've got Clubs Float and Rock and Roll, the collaboration with Danny Almeida of Original Strength coming out. And that's where we combined original strength resets with kettlebells and Indian clubs. Not exactly traditional club swinging, even though some of those elements are in there, but it's kind of exploring Indian clubs through the original strength lens. And then, as you probably already know, Paul Walkowinsky and I were supposed to be on tour in March, and we only got one out of our 4 workshops in before we had to shut down and cancel everything. So we filmed our Indian clubs and mace manuals. And the Indian clubs that one out already. And then I think within the next 2 weeks, the mace one's going to go out on indianclubsacademy.com. So I'm excited about having the programs.
Yeah, very awesome.
Yeah.
Very awesome. So tell us a little bit about your relationship with Paul, and because I'm not sure everybody here knows about that. And that'd be a great way to kind of start. Yeah.
It's actually a really funny and interesting story how I got to know Paul personally. I obviously came across his work over the years because his YouTube library is quite extensive. It's very in-depth with a ton of tutorials, and he's been putting out content, I believe, for about a decade on YouTube. In the beginning of my mace journey, I was first introduced to Balavas, short maces, back in 2009 from my original kettlebell mentor, Anthony DeLugio, of What Was Art of Strength. So that was my first kind of dive into circular patterns with Indian clubs in Balava. But it really wasn't until the past 5 years that I started to get back into circular training. And I was one of the first women to compete in mace competition. And I was like, you know what, I'm a mom. I'm like, I kind of have no problem putting myself out there. I'll try new things. And I went to the Arnold's Classic and competed in kettlebell sport, which I was novice at, very new to it. And I did the mace competition right after that. And to back up for a moment, I helped set up the event. So my friend Yuri runs AKA, the American Kettlebell Alliance. So we drove out to Ohio. I put the whole thing together with him, so we could have our stage and stuff. But during the weekend, we had to compete again and do like a demo on the main Rogue stage in front of like thousands of people and all the screens. And I was like, what just happened? So I got up on stage after competing already, and they're like, oh, you're going to go up again. I was like, okay. And a clip of the event circulated in media, and Paul came across it, and he actually put up a YouTube video kind of critiquing / criticizing these women that were swinging, at the competition. And I came across it and I defended myself. So, I have this thing with media is, a little clip or blurb or photograph never really tells the real story, right? There's always a backstory. There's always a bigger picture. There's a reason. And because media is so quick, people are very quick to react without having the full disclosure. So, I was brand new to mace competition, and it was like, hey, I had just already competed twice. I had been awake for 12 hours driving straight from Connecticut to Ohio, and I had to set everything up. Thousands of people were watching me, and at least I put myself out there. I wasn't there to say that I was better than anybody or that I knew, I just wanted to try. And so that started a dialogue. And I remember I was like, like, defending myself, advocating for myself. I think that's really important. I think people need to advocate for themselves if they come across something that is kind of, I know my swinging wasn't the best, but I felt apt to advocate for myself. And so that started a dialogue between us, and we became fast friends, and we laugh about it now. And what's important to remember is everybody starts somewhere. So my first swings were terrible. Now, yesterday, I was swinging this 20-pound, 2-inch gata single hand 360s for a number of continuous reps. It's a process. So it actually, I think of Paul as, well, besides being my mentor, he's like family to me, and sometimes family disagree and sometimes, so it was just like we found a ton of common ground. And then we found that we really worked well together. I love the fact that, he's in Australia. He's a few decades older than me. He has the historical side and years and years of like priming technique and traveling to India numerous times, traveling to Iran to learn these tools. And then for myself, I come from the athletic background and from being in the business. And so it's just an interesting combination, but that's the true story. And we totally crack up now about how we became friends.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a cool relationship. Sorry, go ahead, Amanda.
I was gonna say, do you get to see him very often, or
so you guys? So not really, because obviously we say that he lives in the land of Oz. You know, with Australia being so far away. I hosted him 2 years ago for his first workshop after his cancer diagnosis. So he had to cancel he has prostate stage 4. He had canceled his tour, went into treatment, and then it was his first event back. And I had my 2 friends, Tom Billage and William Cavani, make 35 handmade custom gatas for the event, which was really special. And that was I hosted it at Uri's Place here in Wilton, Connecticut. So that was the first time I had met him in person. And then we found that we worked really well together. We just became like this yin and yang team. So from there, we started to collaborate, and we did, for a period of time, the ICI with Kevin, and we went on a tour. And that was last spring, I believe. And then this year he came out, we did St. Louis. And then from St. Louis, we were supposed to go to Connecticut here, and then to Bath, England, and to my buddy Paul Gray's place, Durham City in England, but that all got canceled. Mm-hmm. So at least we got him home. That was a very interesting week. It was so surreal.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And that's Kevin Rail, Rail, correct? So you and Kevin are the American partners with Paul. Is that
so
how
we
that
did
works?
like a collaboration for that period of time to go on tour. So we did a series of 3 workshops. We went to actually it was 4. No, it was 3, because we did San Diego. John Parker hosted us. Then we came back to Connecticut. We did Wilton. Then we had 2 in New York, I think it was. Oh my gosh, I should remember this.
Well, you're so busy. Just following you. You're doing things online now. Like I saw your blog post.
It's very strange.
Yeah. Well, and Amanda did the same thing. I admire both of you, because and Amanda did the same thing, went from training in her gym in Louisiana, very successful, amazing 12 coach. As soon as these lockdowns happened, there was no wasting time. It was immediately look at changing your business model. Instead of sitting back and, oh, what am I going to do? It was like, no, boom, you changed, and you guys have both done so well.
I was just having a conversation with a friend of mine who owns a small business yesterday. And John Oda and I had a conversation about this last week. Cool. It's kind of like when you have that entrepreneurial, that kind of like small business, it's like you have a lot of grit, right? And you have like this thing of like, go. And I was paralyzed, I think, at first from shock of having to cancel all the workshops and trying to deal with how do you get a hold of all these people and they're all in turmoil? So like, and getting Paul back home. And then all of a sudden I found myself homeschooling my 10-year-old son. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And then I realized that, like, I'm assuming Amanda too, like your clients all of a sudden are in upheaval. And I realized that I really needed to respect what my clients were going through, even though we rely on them to make a living, like they needed their own space to digest everything. So I focused on Paul and I filming our programs, getting him home safely in week 1. Week 2 was kind of adjusting to being home with Leonardo and finding a system. And then like every week was kind of like something else. And then I realized, and much probably like you, Amanda, I was like, all right, like this is my reality right now. And I canceled 7 workshops. What could I possibly do? Take it to the online platform. And it is a work in progress. Learning as I go.
That's a big undertaking, like having those workshops and then taking it online like that. I mean, because a lot of my clients, I'd say about half of them adapted really well to just transitioning online. They're like, I got to do this, make it. And they were all, my son's grown and gone, but their children are pretty young. And so they were dealing with the homeschool situation also, and just a bit more frazzled. They had more time.
Yep.
But it didn't feel like they did. You know what I mean? Like they were just frazzled with this new reality. And yeah, so every week was like another milestone. Like, what are we going to do the next week? It's like always a surprise.
And I find like this week in particular, I've had a lot more of my clients kind of like resurfacing. I had a few that like transitioned, a few that just had to adapt, 4 kids at home, both parents now working from home. And I was like, I'm going to just say I'm here. I finally got a few that I'll train outside, social distancing and all that stuff. But it's starting to pick up again. I think everybody's kind of like, all right, this is going to be like this for a while. Now it's time to really kind of get my feet wet and back into doing my stuff. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
You own a gym? I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. No, I don't. I'm an independent contractor. And so like, that actually is, I think, kind of great right now because I don't have any overhead. So this is my home training space, and it's only 6x8, this little mat that I got off of Amazon. This is my living room. I live in a small condo with my husband and son, and literally behind here in my kitchen is a full bench of kettlebells, sandbags, like every corner, there's a rower over there of my home has my equipment. So it just naturally became my office. So I'm very fortunate to have this here.
Very much. Yeah. I was going to ask both of you guys if you have found that there's any of your clients who are now kind of maybe preferring the online versus having to go to the gym. And you maybe think that's going to transition into fewer at the gym once this is maybe all behind us.
I think for myself, it's a mix, like I really personally, I'm such an extrovert and I thrive being around people. I love contact. I love the tactility and being in person and doing things. But with my knowing that all the summer camps are canceled, and I think I have to be primarily working out of my home right now because I have no sitting. My in-laws live nearby, but they're high risk, and my mother-in-law has pre-existing conditions. So we don't really have anybody to watch him. And then there's a big question mark about what happens in September. I'm really hesitant about to get excited about school starting. So I think the longer you go into this process, the more likely people kind of adapt and get used to it because we're adaptable as humans. And I've always wanted to build further into education. That was my goal over the past 2.5 years. So I think it'll be a mixed bag. I think I'll have I like enjoying both. It's been pretty cool having people from Italy attend a virtual workshop and, training somebody in England. And, I have a virtual workshop tomorrow and people are coming from all over. That's pretty freaking cool.
Very,
very cool.
very cool.
Or do you feel the same, Amanda? You think you're gonna have like both, or do you think people will go right back in?
I do. And a lot of the same thing with, school starting back. Some of the parents are talking about just going ahead and making a plan to homeschool and just having that be it. So they've made up their mind and they can like kind of move forward with that idea in mind. And what that means in my gym is that most of the moms will be home doing that. And so they are adapting to the online and they like it and they can be a little more leisurely with it, because I send them videos and things to do daily. And since this has happened, I was telling Amy before we got on the call, I have 4 men's lifting groups now. Like it's all men. Like it just occurred to me yesterday. I was like, I have like all guys now. This is and I just took on like 4 more new guys. And I was like, this is kind of crazy, because usually it's about 50-50. And with me, I have a handful of women and the rest are all guys. And I have about 32 clients.
That's
and we have opened back up. So I'm back in the gym every day.
You are? You're back in the gym?
Yeah. We've opened. So, and we can, small group training. So I'm doing 4 at a time. And that's it.
4 at a time. And then do they have to take their temperatures or like wear gloves or are there any I
have to wear masks and we have really, but independent contractors too, but the LLC is mine.
Yep.
And so one of my rules is it has to be pretty immaculate always. And I've always been a little bit of a tyrant about that game with sanitization a long time ago. Now we have a station set up when people come in, you have to do this process first. Uh-oh, I'm breaking up, aren't I? So yeah, and they, personal responsibility of the clients, so that's all you can do really.
We're so intertwined with Manhattan because most of my clients in this area commute to work in finance in the city or commute for work. So it's going to be really interesting to see because I know like with our Fairfield County, that's like the hot spot of Connecticut. And then we're working with New Jersey and New York to try to, that we're kind of on their page. So it's going to be interesting to see what rolls out. And I think with fitness, I guess we all have to kind of like ebb and flow with what the changes are and see where it takes us in the fall. It's like every day I talk to another trainer or small business owner and it's just like wow, now it's sunk in now 2.5 months in that it's going to be different for a while.
Definitely.
Yeah, for sure. And it is a little strange to me. Oregon, we had pretty severe lockdowns immediately but the opening up has been, I think, pretty smooth. It's a county by county. Multnomah County, where Portland is still, they're not quite there yet. But where John is in Deschutes County, where I am in Coos County, things are opening up a little faster. And it's just like you guys say, the personal responsibility. It's sort of like we have to police ourselves. Mm-hmm. And my particular county is kind of funny, and I wonder if John's is the same. We're very highly tourist. We get a lot of our income or economy depends on tourism, and my county is just like, stay home, don't come here. And I'm like, that might not be the message we want to send because someday we're going to want those people back.
Exactly. I know. It's odd. And that's, I think right now that the workouts that we do that time is so needed. It's like that nurtures our soul while we're going through this. And that's what I kind of am expressing to one of my clients that I finally got to see her yesterday after not seeing her for 2.5 months. And we were outside and I was like, season's great. Like just having that conversation again, you could see them light up. I think it's going to enrich a lot of like what we do though. There's definitely silver linings throughout.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, can I talk a little bit about that the type of training you do? It's the circular training because it is a little different than just going out and lifting weights. There's that mind connection. And I think it's something I've been kind of exploring more. since I did the mace workshop last year with you in Seattle. And I thought it's like this missing link that I was in my training. And it's hard. It's really hard to learn. But once you start picking it up, it's so valuable. Can you speak to that a little?
Sure. Well, I mean, I work in conventional fitness. So like I've been in Westport, Connecticut as a personal trainer for 17 years. And I remember very distinctly, you know, in my past as a lifelong athlete, but once I got my start at New York Sports Club back in the day, and it was obviously corporate fitness, I was a little confused. I'm like, why are we like putting people and sitting them down on these machines and it's all labeled 1 through 10 and it's like they have to go through like an assembly line? I was like, this isn't movement. Like I always like was like there's more. And I was always kind of like curious and looking for other ways to train. And I remember like the kettlebell, when I first came across my first time training with a kettlebell, I was like, this is what I'm talking about, because it's skill-based. There's communication, dexterity with the hands, and it's a process. You have to like learn, you have to be present. And that was very intriguing to me. And once I got certified in 2000, I think it was 8 or 9 with Anthony, that's when I also got introduced to Indian clubs and the balavas and battle ropes, TRX, but it was the physical culture at that time. You know, like the way that he taught us before we even touched a kettlebell, we learned how to like snatch a dumbbell and a barbell first. And there was a series of like regressions and progressions for everything. And that was the most monumental kind of experience in my career still to date. And a few years ago, I got very sick with colitis. I had food poisoning that was very severe and I was hospitalized. Remember the year that spinach and cantaloupe were in the news for listeria and salmonella? Well, I got a salad that had both spinach and cantaloupe while I was in the city. And that was a Monday. By that Saturday, I was hospitalized for the first time. And I was very ill for a long time and on antibiotics for many months that kind of totally killed my gut system. So the only way to heal was time. I tried everything. And movement, I decided to start working out at home rather than at work because I needed healing. I needed to have my own space. And then I found that once I started getting back into the circular tools, that I was like, it complements everything else that we do. So you're crossing the midline of your body, you're doing rotation, you're getting that transverse turn through the shoulders, and your dexterity, that communication with the palms, and the brain is firing, contralateral movement, all this kind of stuff. And I also started dipping into kettlebell sport for the first time, and I was jerking bells all the time overhead, and my body was like, oh, I just can't do any more like up overhead under load. But then you start kind of crossing that midline, and my body is like, yes, thank you. So I found that it really complemented my training. So with clients, even though I work in conventional fitness, I dabble these patterns in, you know, and obviously not every client is going to be inclined to learning these tools, but it's amazing how many actually are interested, and you just implement it throughout. So you thread it and weave it in. And sometimes, like, I have a male nurse here locally that reached out just for Indian clubs, but how his wife follows me on Instagram, and that's how, you know, she takes my classes, my bar classes, and that's how I met him. So it's just like, and then even now this past week, I got contacted by a couple that live in Connecticut that own a gym in the town over, and I'm going to train them next week. They're interested in implementing Indian clubs because of all the lifting and sagittal plane stuff. So they enrich movement. I hope that made sense. I know I'm rambling, but.
Definitely. And I heard you talking to Tim Anderson about hand and feet health.
Yes.
And that's part of it, right?
Yes.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, you know, like I've always been, foot care and hand care have been very important to me for a very long time. My mother has extreme arthritis. So she has like a claw hand. My mom can't open up her palm. And she's been affected, her feet. I remember when my mom was very young. So she was 20 when she had me. So I have distinct memories of when she was younger than I am now. And I was a teenager, and she always had to elevate her feet, and she had all this pain and discomfort. And when I was in college, I took care of my grandmother for a year and a half before she passed, and she was 92, but right before her 92nd birthday. And her body was, this is on my father's side, was crippled with arthritis. So she couldn't grip anything. Her spine was collapsing. And she had a lot of issues with her hands. And I think of like, oh my God, like your hands are, yeah, how often do we use our hands? How often, like we rely on them constantly. We rely on our feet constantly. So when I got into the business, that was something that I never understood. Why is like fitness always streamlined to like either aesthetics or, HIIT training, burn this. And it's great. There's purposes behind that. That's fantastic. But what about what's happening in the next decade from now? So it's like, even though I'm in my 40s now, I'm thinking about what I do this decade is going to set me up for the next decade. And that's going to set me up for the next. So if I work on my foot health, I'll be able to maintain a level of activity that I'm used to. If I take care of my hands and I have strong hands, I'm going to be more resilient. My heart is going to be stronger. And that dialogue doesn't really come into play, especially with women, very often at all. We're so caught on the present and looking sometimes a certain way versus, remember, you're probably going to have this body another maybe 40, 50 years. So let's keep it going. Those things are vital to me. Pain-free. I want to be pain-free.
Yeah. So what do you do? What are your practices?
I mainly train barefoot. And I went to the Barefoot Strong Summit, I think 2 years in a row with Dr. Emily I always say EBFA, Evidence-Based Foot Academy. I think that's what it is. And I was very intrigued by what she shared there. And then I wear toe spreaders. I have a lot of the Foot Collective material. I have a couple of the balance beams and stuff. So I do have a bunion on my right side, and I feel like I've been able to fend off discomfort just by keeping my feet strong with foot care. And I'll do some toe exercises and ball exercises for my feet. And as far as my hands specifically, like I'll do some OS resets, but I find that communicating with the clubs, and especially like this sucker right here, that was a beast to swing yesterday. But all that grip work that I've been doing forever, I think it's just like the stronger my hands are, hopefully the longer I could use them without pain.
Yeah.
It's
And
so
the stronger
true.
your hands are, the stronger everything is.
Yeah.
And we both like to do a lot of the strongman kind of training, some of the nail bending, some of the grip.
I was like, look at you.
Yeah, it's super fun. And and Amanda too, she bends the same nails, and
That's amazing. Go
yeah.
ladies. I love that.
It's
That's
really fun.
That's like totally a skill. Nail bending. Like that's fascinating.
Definitely a lot.
Yeah, it's a skill. It's not that hard to pick up, really. It's something with a little coaching, and then you just build up like anything else,
Yeah, that's wonderful. I love that.
Yeah, it's fun.
Kelly, sorry, Amy, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Show her.
Oh, I have one right here.
So I saw you were talking about walking on it. I did it. I walked on it. I never thought about walking on it.
Yeah, I got my black one right here. I love it. I should mention that as foot care. Yeah.
I walked on it this morning. It wasn't that bad.
No, it's not that bad. You get used to it.
Good. Yeah, definitely.
My son will step on it too. But it's funny how, like, if you just kind of take, both of you have kettlebell background, but it's amazing if you just take your shoes off, how much more connection you have to your movement and to the tools. And why I'm fascinated by these circular tools, and much like a kettlebell, is if the technique is there, no matter kind of what the weight, it feels weightless, it feels seamless. I'm fascinated by that.
Mm-hmm. It is interesting. Well, and you were talking about women too having a hard time picking up some of that why the grip is important, let's say. And I coached some high school kids a few years ago, and I would teach them the deadlift. It was a track team, and I was the strength coach. I could not get the girls to grip the bar with any strength. They just wanted to kind of finger the bar very delicately, and then they expected to deadlift all this weight. I'm like, you have to grip it. They did, and even a lot of the women that I would run classes out of my home gym. They don't want to grip, and I had a few kind of get a little mad at me. I don't see why I should have to grip this if the weight isn't very heavy. And I'm like, no, you have to grip it. It's been one of the hardest things to teach women is that grip part. Just
that's a subject all on its own, that's like something to dive into, because it's layered, it's cultural, it's how we've been trained in a different sense, just in our society or socially. And then you realize it's interesting, because when you talk about the girls, before quarantine, I had been working with the local high school in Westport to create a physical culture class as a PE elective. And I went to train the PE staff in mace training and Indian clubs. And then I did 2 presentations with the students at the high school. And I was so impressed by a couple of, there's 3 or 4 girls that were so intrigued by Indian clubs in mace, and I got them to swing. And I was like, oh my gosh, I was like, yes. And they were asking legit questions. They were straight up curious. And I was like, that is amazing. It was like a light bulb moment. And I'm like, if they just get exposed to it and there's a dialogue, and I was stressing kind of the importance, and I don't know, they probably thought I was like, what is this 40-something-year-old person saying? But I was just like, I get it. You're a teenager now, and you're in your body now, and you're in the present. But trust me, down the road, these things that are going to be important. It'll be like a light bulb moment. You'll see what I'm saying. But it was just really cool. It was a really cool experience.
Yeah. I wish that I had been exposed to the clubs and the mace training when I was a teenager playing volleyball. My kids were swimmers, golf. It's like, oh man, I wish this had been a part of our life when I was doing those other sports, like you say, to weave it in.
It's interesting, because I was thinking, I'm like, if circular training basically has been around since the dawn of mankind, right? So that's how, back in the day, warriors trained, and then the way wrestlers trained. So in Iran, in ancient Persia, and in India, and then the British Army adopted Indian clubs from India. And that, there was 2 times when Indian clubs were actually an Olympic sport, that they appeared in the Olympics. And if you think about the way that people move, we got so far away from the farm or preparing for battle, or so far removed from that. But then we have a lot of athletes who throw, but they don't do any specific training really to cross that midline of the body or a transverse turn for the shoulders. I just feel like I'm so resilient. And I can't tell you how many times I've talked to a woman who's come to take a class, and she's like, oh, I have a torn rotator cuff. What did you do? I was driving and I reached back to hand my kid something and my shoulder tore. I'm like, well, there's a reason why that story is very common. But if you start doing parallels and outward heart shapes, and you start to channel and mobilize those tendons, ligaments, and build a little bit of resilience, maybe you become a little bit more resilient and you're able, I don't know. I think there's a benefit. And that's why I started incorporating Indian clubs into the Sturdy Athlete program that I do for local tennis players, which are a lot of women who are 40, 50, 60s, and they play tennis, but they play tennis for fitness instead of getting fit for tennis. Mm-hmm. So you're dealing with a slew of injuries. So I incorporate original strength resets, the sand dune for foot health. I use that for my feet too. And stick mobility, which I use constantly to mobilize, strengthen, and stabilize. And then Indian clubs. So if they're always kind of going up overhead here, there's so many discrepancies on their dominant and less dominant side. You add in a little bit of circular training, and I mean, like, obviously this is very cumbersome, and it kind of freaks you out a little bit if you don't know anything about it. But if you take a small club, it becomes manageable. You're like, oh, okay. Like, I'm gripping a racket every day. Why not grip an Indian club? Getting into wrist articulations, all that stuff that they need, so they don't always have tennis elbow, all that.
Yeah, and I have had in the past a lot of, I'm not going to say terrible problems with elbow, but I used to have quite a bit of elbow pain, and since picking up the clubs and the mace a year ago, just really just playing with it, no elbow pain. It's gone.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Did you have chronic like tendonitis or something?
No, but just kind of hard training, doing some of the strong first, preparing for the level 1. I kind of tweak my elbow, preparing for the body weight certification, all the pull-ups, just get sore elbows.
So that's what I was talking to someone about recently. So when you go into kind of like, I'll compare it to like my 7 kettlebell competitions. Anytime you go into like high volume, or you're repeating that same pattern over and over again. And then if you're like people like we're constantly moving and working and demonstrating and like the chance for like overuse is quite substantial. But if you start incorporating other planes of motion or other like lever lengths, and crossing that midline of the body and having that transverse turn and taking the trunk of the body and rotating through the torso, the T-spine, and the hips, and opening up those lateral lines, then you're most likely able to kind of build a little bit of resilience and offset that. Like the constant pull-ups and the constant snatches and pressing, that's quite grueling if you think about it on your structure. But if you take like you gotta mobilize those wrists, you gotta stretch out that fascia in those forearms, or like everything around that elbow joint is gonna go here. It's gonna just go whoop, and ball up.
Yeah, for sure.
Because I plan on doing stuff forever. I don't want to slow down.
No.
That's settled. No. I'm starting.
Yeah, I've been trying to tell her.
What'd you say, Amanda? I'm sorry.
I said that settles it. I'm starting it.
Yeah, you're done. You're ready. Dive in. Pow.
Yep. It's a little addicting. I mean, there's so many sizes of clubs. There's so many mace sizes. You just got to go to get a set on Amazon and just start. Just do it.
What it also is too is like psychologically, like, and historically, humans have always been drawn to circles and spirals. So like, and then all of a sudden you have these tools that you could create circles and spirals around the body. And it's like a mental and physical, like, you get into like a Zen mode. But it's like, when you're learning like new patterns, it's kind of like nutrition for your mind. I always call it like brain food, and Paul and I call it like mental gymnastics. So it's a way to kind of like, I call it intelligent fitness too, because I think it's a way to kind of work your mind as you're working your body, and, and it's in a different format. I think, we're always instilled in us that training, especially from my sports background too, it's a specific way, or, like in this circumstance, it's like this. And then if you take a different sport, it's supposed to be this. And, you know, in the gym, if you go to a box, it's supposed to look like this. But if you go to F45 or Orange Theory, this is, you know, but it's not really like that. You know, there's a lot of gray. I think there's so much beauty in exploring the gray areas and taking different elements from other cultures that are rich in history and, or, you know, other modalities and blending them to kind of get this perfect recipe that maybe how I choose to incorporate it is different than you, Amanda, and different from you, Amy, but it's like you find what works for you and it's rewarding. And I feel like that's one of the reasons why people fall off the wagon a lot or really ebb and flow with fitness is because they're always thinking about exercise and fitness itself rather than thinking of like adopting like a new skill. And I think if you kind of approach it from that mindset and like the journey and the process of like learning patterns and stuff, it just changes the way the mindset changes.
Yeah,
Definitely.
we interviewed Dr. Mark Chang last week.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was a great interview and talking about his K3 combat systems. So, incorporating the sticks and doing some of the Kali fundamentals. He said something that was so interesting, and it's that, and then the slow training. So when you do Tai Chi, slowing everything down, and he said that he goes, "What's the number one burner of glucose in your body?" And we're kind of, it's your central nervous system. So when you are learning something new, you're actually burning a ton of fuel. Yes. And you don't have to go hammer yourself. You can just be learning a new club pattern or a new Kali stick pattern, and you're going to be burning some calories or some fuel and not have to just destroy yourself along the way physically.
Exactly. I have this thing where if I'm learning a new pattern or I'm trying to sequence, I don't know why, but I'll play like the same Led Zeppelin or Pink Floyd or like Dave Matthews song. Like recently it's been Phil Collins for like 30 minutes and I'll just hammer and I'm like, oh shit. And then I'm like, all right, put the clubs down, walk away, come back. And then I like realize that 30 minutes later, I've been moving nonstop. And there's actually like your legs get involved in mace training and club training quite a bit, especially with mace. And like yesterday, you could even see in the slow-mo video that I shared on Instagram, how like, as I drop into that backswing and I'm like, okay, I got to create, it's got to come up and then I got to pull and go into the elbow circle. There's a lot of work from my feet all the way. It's like that energy is like like roots, you know, coming up through the body. That's the stuff that I'm like fascinated by. I think it's so cool.
So, okay, if we're going to start, would you suggest a mace or a club, and where would they get that, and where would they begin?
Well, it also depends. So like now that obviously there's a lot of exposure to these tools, right? That some people think that it creates range of motion. But in order to swing properly and efficiently, you need to have a certain amount of range of motion that's required. So that's why I'm able to get my hand to drop down into the backswing to the base of my neck, and I'm not torquing my elbow. Paul and I were talking about this last night. I'm like, that elbow circle is actually starting from my shoulder girdle in through my lats, teres major, minor, you know, like all these things have to kind of function. So if I can't access my bicep in line with my ear here, I know I'm in trouble with a client that can't swing. Like, so I have to open up and irrigate the lateral lines and stuff. So that's one thing that I think is important, is like, find somebody that is able to kind of do a bit of an assessment and make sure that you're doing things safely. And I know that if I'm like, the reason I started incorporating stick mobility into workshops with Indian Club and Mace when I have it available, or bringing Indian Club into Mace workshops, is the more I was teaching and traveling, I realized that quite a few people have, you know, things that are inhibiting their movement. My responsibility is to keep them safe and to get them to eventually swing efficiently. So there are a lot of resources for club training. I would definitely recommend, Paul, because his YouTube library is so extensive, and so his website. And then on indianclubsacademy.com is where we filmed our Indian Clubs Basics manual. So it's 20 videos that also have our manual. And he did such an awesome job editing, because there's like these little graphs that are put in, like we work on a clock system, so you could see the clock. And it's pretty neat the way that it pulls together, because I think oftentimes you could go and see something and say, I want to try that. But then you go, instead of going from A, B, C, D, you go right from A to D. So I would definitely recommend, number one, having some sort of an assessment, or if you are starting to work with somebody, be very aware of what's inhibiting your movement, especially if you're going to get into mace training. The technique is really important, because if the swing is up high here, you're overworking the forearms, elbows, wrists start having issues. And that's how I started getting into teaching workshops, was people were contacting me, hey, can you watch my video? Like, why am I all like funky? So if there's somebody in your area that could help you with either Indian Club and mace, there's also other resources. Obviously, everybody's very much familiar when it comes to mace with, gosh, there's so many people now, John Oden, Rick Brown. I mean, the list goes on and on. But there's a ton of resources. And sometimes my personal belief is, if Indian clubs could be a great segue into mace training, everybody could pretty much use an Indian club to some capacity. So even like with I have a client with MS, and she has a lot of coordination issues and balance issues. So taking clubs and just having her march in place. So 1 pound, 2 pound clubs marching in place. She's getting feedback to her central nervous system, as Amy touched on earlier, and there's ways to implement these tools safely. And if you're interested in mace training, if you understand the transverse turn through the shoulders with parallels, then all of a sudden you go into a mace, even if it's one lever, you understand the transverse turn through the shoulders. I don't know. I know I kind of went down the rabbit hole there, but I hope that makes sense.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, and I think that was great, Kelly, because I think a lot of people are just, picking up a mace. They're, buying a mace, and you see them, I got my mace, and they're doing these turns, and just from the workshop I did with you, there is a lot more to it than just turning that thing around your head. If you want to advance, if you want to be comfortable, if you want to be safe. And I feel really fortunate to have John. Yeah. John's only a few hours away, and I get over to Bend occasionally. So
that's fantastic.
Yeah.
John's amazing. But that's why I created Fix Your Swing program on my new website, was because I'm aware, I just got contacted by a gentleman in Colorado who's amazing. He's such a sweetheart. But when quarantine happened, he really wanted to get into mace training. The only mace that he could find was the Onnit quad mace, which is 25 pounds. And when he contacted me and sent me video, I was like, okay, and so we had our first hour, and now the Sorensens are making him a gata, and that, it'll be the appropriate weight and length for him. And then I also had a gentleman who is in Canada who's 6'8", and that's a big person, and was using a 10-pound, traditional kind of mainstream steel mace. But that is so short and condensed in the feedback. He wasn't understanding the sensation, because the feedback for him with that tool wasn't appropriate. So now he's getting a gata. So it's just, I'm just fascinated by that. And there's ways to, if you're intrigued by these tools, I just highly recommend finding something. There's so many people out there, but find somebody that their energy resonates with you, and reach out to that person if you don't have someone in your area.
Yeah. Okay. And you touched on this at the workshop, the difference between a mass-produced mace and a homemade mace or gata. And we, at the workshop in Seattle, we all got the mace, the Ryan Pitts maces.
Yep.
And the difference in how they feel in your hand it's unbelievable.
It is. That's
I mean,
another reason why I started bringing, like, if I was doing workshops that I could drive to, I started packing all the gatas that I had in my car, you know, like in my home, and into my car and taking them with me, even though I had the traditional, like, mainstream steel maces as part of registration, because they're a great tool to, like, learn with. You know, they're affordable. But I was able to improve people's swinging by alternating between the steel mace and a gata, because the gata would then give them the feedback that they would have to create with that steel mace. I think of it as almost having like earmuffs on for and things are muffled. And then all of a sudden you get that feedback from a longer lever, the natural material. So the bamboo has that, like, you know, even though that's looks straight, it's not exactly straight. It's a little crooked. So all of these things fire up. Just like, you know, you were talking, Amanda, about the nail mat, right? You step on that, everything kind of lights up. Mm-hmm. So when you have a tool that's giving you that feedback, everything kind of lights up. And if it's like the traditional mainstream steel mace, yes, you could swing it, of course. And it's also meant as like an offset tool for and interpreted in many different ways, which is fantastic. Taking a gata and swinging it, though, all of a sudden your brain starts to comprehend that proper cast, dropping down into the backswing and having that weightless pendulum, and then up here when that float, and then when to create tension to pull down to that front rack position. It's just like taking those earmuffs off and things are like, so that's what I found was really helpful. And then with other, it depends on the company, but like Ryan Pitts mace, I have the couple right behind me here, even though they're steel, it's different. It's a different kind of steel. The dimensions are different. The feedback is quite different too, like you experienced, Amy.
Yeah, it's cool. I can see Amanda. She's thinking she's gonna go out and buy a mace.
Let it turn, girl. Let it turn.
I just started on Wim Hof's workshop, and because I am in total. I know I'm in need of recovery of a different kind, you know, and it's working really well. But I would really love to incorporate these into my training for sure.
My favorite thing, like, is in the winter, like, well, we didn't really have much of a winter here, but like this year, I love swinging in the snow, you know, like when it's like that crisp, really cool, like refreshing air, and then just doing like clubs out in the snow on like when it's kind of flurrying and stuff. It's something that's just, it's so restorative. It's like your brain just goes into like healing mode. We all need a little bit of that.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. That cold is something. It does make you feel alive. I love it. Like I just like snow. I grew up in Montana, so I mean,
did you? That's awesome.
And I miss it. I miss that climate a lot. And Amy and I traveled, and her husband traveled to Iceland last summer, and I was just in heaven. You know, we'd jump in the sea and then get in a sauna, and it was just like, oh, this is so great. Just that really lights you up.
Now, like with just like when even in quarantine now, it's like how much more I like enjoy nature. My son and I go hiking into the woods, and I'm like amazed at how my morning could start off pretty stressful these days, just in my headspace. And the second we get out into the woods and he and I are talking, and he's like, Mom, what do I expect in 5th grade? And you know, we're talking, and then we're hearing the birds and watching the squirrels and just sun's out. It's so restorative. And I think that's all what we need right now too, is a lot of nature time.
Definitely. Yeah. Definitely. Have you guys ever, I know I'm probably driving Amy crazy with this subject because I've talked to her about it so much, but Eckhart Tolle, have you read any of his books?
No, but if you would say the titles, I will definitely check them out.
Well, one is The Power of Now, and the other one is A New Earth.
I'm putting that in my phone. The Power of Now and the New Earth.
and a new earth. And nature, and why it's so important for us to connect to it and to animals, is because they are only in the here and now. They're not thinking about what they did yesterday, and they're not thinking about the future. They are like right here, right now. That's all that's important. And that's why we love that so much. And when we get out in it and experience it, it's like all of a sudden, all that stuff, that garbage is gone out of your head, you know, it just clears everything up.
That's how I think about these tools, though. You know, like back in the day, archery, you know, like circular patterns were a part of training. Like with the meal and Jory, you know, one was a shield, one was a sword. With the Indian clubs, there's hammer grip, which was boop, hitting something, saber grip, sword fighting. You know, like, so these applications, and it's kind of just natural.
Like you're saying, you get into a flow, you get into that rhythm, you know? Yeah.
I was thinking about this when we were talking earlier, that flow state, or being able to get into that is so important for athletics, because you think about your very best athletic performance, even if it was 30 years ago, it's when your mind is in that state and you're not just thinking about going 100% with your body, but you get into that flow state. And that's when you see these people, you know, score 50 points in a basketball game. And if you don't practice getting into that state, how are you ever going to do it when you go to perform?
That's well put. Yes.
So for the sport nuts out there, and my husband and son are still really, they love golf, and they both have their best games, their best matches. You don't play a golf game, you do a golf match. But they're relaxed. You know, you're laughing, you're relaxed. You're not just hyper focused and thinking about each swing. It just happens.
It's like when athletes have their headphones on before, you know, they play or they are about to race. You know, you channel that through listening to certain music that resonates with you, you know, before. So it's like, it's just interesting. Like the human brain and the connection with the tools that we use, or this style of how, you know, we're competing, whether it's body weight running or, you know, swimming in a pool. I think it's fascinating.
It is.
I could hear my son humming. Do you hear him?
I hear him. Yeah, that's awesome. How's your son taking the whole this whole lockdown? He probably loves having mom home and being with mom all day.
Well, we together, I am really enjoying my time with him, because there was a period of time when he was younger, I was working 7 days a week. And at that time, my husband was unemployed. And so we had kind of like a swapped role reversal. And now this time it's interesting, because like we could have like this amazing dialogue. You know, he's like, what's fifth grade going to be like? And what am I going to expect here? And, you know, like we just are having these awesome conversations. He does have challenging days because, you know, like, I think for us as adults, we can acknowledge like what we're feeling. We could figure it out and we could cope with it quite easy. And we're social creatures, but imagine being like a 10-year-old boy and you haven't even like been physically running around in person with your friends. We're experiencing this, but our kids, I think, are experiencing it at a heightened level because they don't exactly have the maturity or the coping skills that we have. So we just have a lot of dialogue, and some days are harder than others. And he's like, I hate this quarantine, you know, like, and I'm like, I get it, Leo, you know, I totally get what you're saying. And then other days, you know, getting outside is the best. And we'll be walking because we allow him to get on a phone call with a friend, do a FaceTime thing. But for every time he's like on a call for a certain period of time, we have to get outside, and he's got to get some vitamin D. He's got to get fresh air because we live in a condo. I don't have a yard. So it's like, you know, I can't be like, hey, just go outside in the backyard and go run around. So I have to really be aware of his mental and physical health right now. And it, you know, and as stressful as I could be feeling it at times, I have these tools behind me that are keeping me like level because of that flow state. And then I'm able to really kind of be very present with him and acknowledge his needs. And it's hard to do that working from home and feeling the stress I went from being the primary breadwinner to just being like, there it is. Like everything. Now it's starting to kind of come back a bit, but you know, you can't, if we think about it in our adult terms, we're seeing it as like, man, for barely like almost 3 months, I've barely made what I normally make. And I just have to be very grateful for the fact that there's a lot of silver linings. There's you know, I've used this time to create, just like Amanda, like you were saying about taking your business online. You know, there's that entrepreneurship, that grit. And so I'm sharing that stuff with my son and I'm saying, hey, you know, like this experience now, I know you're 10 and you don't quite get it, but when you're 20, 30, you're going to look back on this and you're going to see there's positives that are in it. It's a learning experience, because they keep telling him, you know, my biggest job is to prepare you for the real world, and the world is going to knock you down over and over again. And you have to find ways to get up, to adapt, to advocate for yourself, you know, like all those things.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of wins
sure.
right now in being a parent. It's just challenging.
Yep. I've loved it because I have my 19 and 21-year-old sons home with me. And it's like the youngest hadn't quite moved out yet. And now he may end up staying in the fall. We're not quite sure what's going to happen with his school. And the oldest is home doing his university classes online. And I may get him for another 6 months, which is kind of cool. So
it's an interesting time to be that age, you know, like, because the majority of my clients have college age students. And I wonder what it's like in their headspace right now to kind of, because you're like independent, like you're an adult, or you're, you know, like, but then all of a sudden now you're in flux. So whether you're just graduating or you're in school and they're, you know, in college, your whole kind of life evolves around your social network. And now everything is being changed. And then you have to think about, like, you know, financially, what's my future like? I paid for my own college. I was completely independently financially on my own at the age of 17. So like, I can only imagine what like some kids must be experiencing right now if you don't have the financial backing of family to help you during this time.
yeah.
It's but that's where life prepares you for life, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Another thing that will just make them more resilient, though, if they come into it with the right mindset.
Absolutely. So, and it's a good
yep.
time to learn new skills or revisit old skills. That's what I, you know, said to my son the other day. I'm like, I haven't played basketball in a while. Let's pull out the hoop and into little thing and play, revisit stuff that you used to enjoy.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Kelly, we've been talking more than an hour, and I feel
like
we could keep going.
9:30. I'm like, oh, this was so much fun chatting with you girls, though.
Yeah. Well, we like to do a little thing at the end. We did, and thank you so much. We love to do a little thing at the end, a little question. So a little rapid fire 10 questions, but you don't have to, you know, go super fast. But first one is easy. What's your favorite color?
Blue.
All right. What's your favorite meal?
Oh, that's currently it's not a meal, but I'm a dragon fruit fan. I eat dragon fruit like it's going out of style, and I'll go to Stop and Shop, and if there's like 5, I'm like, I'm taking them all. They're mine.
I never had dragon fruit.
Love it.
The last book that you've read?
Actually, the last book that I read was the most recent book from Original Strength. And why is it escaping me? It's right there in my, I can't even remember right now. My brain stopped working. It's on my bedside table.
Okay. Your favorite band or style of music?
Wow. Zeppelin.
Zeppelin. Sweet. The last movie you watched?
The last movie that I watched a kids movie with my son. Oh, it's new. It's like where the dad comes back. It's like, oh shoot, it's on Netflix. I can't remember the name of it.
Okay.
But we watched it last week.
Something you procrastinate.
Oh, shikes. Well, I have ADD, so I procrastinate a lot. I procrastinate sometimes on doing the most simple things. So I could have a hyper focus for like organizing an event, which is like complex and like, you know, connecting with multiple people and organizing like a spreadsheet. But like if I have to go pick up the dry cleaning, like for hours before I have to go, I'm like, oh God, I can't. It's like the most daunting task. But like if you needed if Amy, you're like, hey, I need this like thing for my podcast, I'll be like, I'm on it, Amy. But then like if I have to go to pick up the like anything from the post office for like hours ahead of going to the post office, I'm like, oh God, just can't do it.
That's funny. Oh, that's good. Your favorite animal?
Oh boy, I do love cats. I do, and dogs. They're on the same.
Yeah. Your a hobby or interest that people listening may not know about.
A hobby or interest. I've always been interested in fencing. I want to try fencing.
That's cool.
I'm like fascinated by just like that timing, and that I love sports that are individual sports like that, where it's just one person and somebody else, and there's like boxing, fencing. I love all that.
Yeah. Cool. Your favorite vacation place?
Ooh, well, I haven't done much traveling, unfortunately, but my favorite vacation place, because my family is up there and I just find it beautiful, is Lake Sunapee in New Hampshire. There's just something about like my childhood memories, because my mom's side of the family owns multiple houses on the lake, and my great-grandfather built a lot of the stone walls around the lake, and there's a lot of family history there. And I just love it. It's nice to get out of the bubble of Fairfield County and out of Connecticut. And, I love New York, but sometimes it's really nice to slow down. And I love that place.
Very cool. And I have to look it up. Google map it.
Yeah.
Okay. Last one. Something people may get wrong about you.
Oh boy, that's a good one. May get wrong about me. Oh boy. That's a tough question. Make that wrong. I think sometimes if I'll put it into like recent stuff in the sense of like, I think sometimes people that see you on media or know that you go and teach and educate, I think sometimes that, you only get a fraction of like what that person is. And I think that one of the biggest things that I struggle with is, I think it's human nature to make assumptions, like I said earlier, without really knowing the person. So I'm very aware that I constantly put myself out there and it's open to interpretation. And so I don't know exactly sometimes what people are interpreting, and I need to just be comfortable with that, and I'm comfortable with that, if that makes sense. That's like a broader way to look at it, because
awesome.
We all have, I'm flawed, we're all flawed, but there's also ways where you could be very aware of some of the things, and awareness is key. But that's what in recent years, that's what I've realized is, there's always going to be people that are going to interpret, and I need to be okay with that.
Yeah.
And
it's awesome though, that you do put yourself out there, because you are a teacher and people are learning from you, and you can't be afraid to put yourself out there, because there's so much more benefit to having you out there than to not. So please keep it up.
Like what we talked about in the beginning, like had I never gotten on that stage at the Arnold's and just went to town and said, okay, like here I am, I'm going to compete in 5 minutes with a mace, you know, on that stage, I wouldn't be where I'm at now. I wouldn't have had the conversations that I've had, or, you know, and I realize that I'm very much a student, and I know that every time I go and teach, I learn something. So I keep a notebook, and after I teach a workshop, I reflect. I kind of write down a general kind of like the demographic, some of the things that I thought I could improve on and stuff like that. And then I go and I reread it back. And I think like, so even I think of how, since I met you, Amy, how my teaching has evolved since that workshop to how I just taught a virtual mace workshop, you know, like a couple weeks ago. And so I'm always striving to just evolve and learn. And I'm aware that I don't know everything, but I'm going to just keep going, you know, like, and learning and evolving. And so that's important to me.
That's awesome.
Very
Well,
good.
thank you so much for taking the time
Thank you,
today.
girl. This was so much fun. I'm ready for another
Yes.
cup of coffee. Then I have to train Michelle. And then my son and I are going to get outside for a walk before it rains.
Sounds like a good day.
Good.
Yeah.
This will be up. This will be up today. I'll have it up by this afternoon on YouTube, and the audio too. So I'll link you.
Awesome.
I'll tag you. We'll be all, yep. So
Sounds fantastic, girls.
all right.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you, Kelly.
It
All
was
right,
so nice chatting with you. You enjoy your Saturday.
Yep. You too. Goodbye, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Bye.